So I came across an interesting but scathing report from India's NDTV. NDTV is a New Delhi television station, so I don't want you to think this story is coming from some American YouTuber banging on India, because that's not the case. However, this is more about the shock and vocal reaction to India's lack of ability to make any progress with decoding, repairing, or deciphering the crashed Air India's Boeing 787 black boxes. And while you would assume since it's an American aircraft with American components, naturally you would just ship the black boxes back to the United States to be downloaded, which actually has been the case for decades because until the last 40 or 50 years or so, countries haven't had the technical capabilities that the US had. However, a lot has changed since then, and many countries, especially in Europe and developed nations, no longer need to rely on the US when it comes to decoding and downloading data from crashed black boxes. But there is an even more pressing reason that India finds itself publicly embarrassed by this latest lack of ability. So I thought we'd talk about it. So in the title of the NDTV piece, it reads, quote, "Experts say India's failure to decode exposes critical gaps in aviation safety." Okay, so right off the bat, you need to understand that in April of this year, just 2 months before the crash, India's Union Civil Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu inaugurated a brand new lab specifically designed for analyzing aircraft flight data and cockpit recordings at the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau headquarters in New Delhi. The facility was also built with a 90 million rupee or a little over $1 million cash investment and technical support from Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. And this was all undertaken with the goal to enable India to independently analyze black boxes meeting global standards, reducing dependency on foreign agencies. So that was some pretty odd timing, to say the least. Okay, so with that understanding, the NDTV story states that experts from all over the world are sounding the alarm over India, the world's third largest aviation market's reliance on a foreign lab for retrieving and decoding flight recorders, warning that the recent Air India Dreamliner crash exposes flaws in crisis management and systemic issues, including a shortage of skilled manpower to manage high-stakes data. Now that right there seems odd. A shortage of tech-savvy manpower in India. Man, I guess times are tough all over. But what makes it even more embarrassing for the call center capital of the world is that despite being a global technology leader, they say India's failure to manage and analyze complex aviation real-time data from high-stakes sectors is unacceptable, adding this deficiency risks incomplete investigations and further compromises aviation safety in the long run. And as I said, even though it was just this April that India rolled out a brand new facility dedicated to flight recorder decoding and deciphering, the minister said, however, that the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau still needs to decide on the decoding location of the Air India's recorders, which will be chosen based on technical safety and security factors. And one of those factors is that it appears that the Boeing 787 aircraft is equipped with 2 enhanced airborne flight recorders that track parameters such as gear and flap positions, engine performance, thrust settings, fuel flow, and even fire handle activation. But I think they all cover that one. But the severity of the June 12 crash has complicated the data recovery. The process involves extracting memory chips and translating it into understandable formats. Investigators rely on this information as one of the many tools to determine the cause of the accident. But regardless of India's inter-country tech and manpower difficulties, according to experts, India's deadliest aviation accident in decades exposes a real lack of government foresight and oversight, highlighting the severe shortage of qualified manpower within key regulatory bodies. But according to Amit Singh, founder of Safety Matters Foundation, he said that while India can develop technology, there's no government foresight. And we do not envision such damage, he said, nor did we ever anticipate such a crash, that we are mostly in a reactionary mode and not long-term planning mode. Moreover, there is a need to ramp up investments to decode ship-level damaged black boxes, he said. But India's Ministry of Civil Aviation's budget for 25-26 has been cut to around $288 million US, down from about $374 million in 23-24, a reduction of 23%. Its capital expenditure has dropped sharply by 91% over the past 2 years, falling from nearly $90 million US to just $8.4 million US. The budget prioritizes the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, which receives the largest share at approximately $3.6 million, while the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau is allocated around $2.4 million. Man, that still does not sound like a lot of money, unless I have my rupee to dollar calculations all out of whack. But seriously, those budgetary cuts are insane. But it was in March of this year that a parliamentary panel flagged these discrepancies. While regulatory compliance is vital, the rapid growth of airports from 74 in 214 to 159 now, with a target of 220 by 2025, as well as air traffic over the years, necessitates proportional increases in accident investigation resources, the report said. Still, the committee considers current allocations modest given the critical nature of accident investigations. Yeah, that's an understatement. However, if all that wasn't bad enough for India, the DGCA faces an acute manpower shortage with over 53% of posts vacant. That's 879 out of 1,633 positions, undermining its ability to enforce safety standards effectively. Yikes. According to NDTV, Captain Mohan Ragathan, former instructor pilot of the Boeing 737 and an aviation safety expert, warned, India possesses the expertise, but they're not employed in DGCA or the Directorate General of the Civil Aviation, which is like the FAA. He said in the recent past, the black boxes of all new generation aircraft crashes were all sent abroad for decoding since we did not have any trained professionals. However, experts described the severity of the A171 crash marked by intense fire and impact damage as unprecedented, which is likely to have hindered the ability to recover data locally. According to aviation expert and CEO of Alabaz Consultants, Sanjay Lozar, he said while the Indian lab may have some great technology and capability, the damage to the black boxes is beyond the scope of normal data retrieval, necessitating international assistance from the US-based National Transportation Safety Board. However, Indian critics aren't convinced with this argument, though. The inability to decode and analyze the recorders underscores the limitations of the new lab to handle critical cases. But a former AAIB official said, the general consensus is that the brand new Indian super lab failed its first big test, raising questions about its readiness to deal with complex scenarios in the future. Singh further said, taking a shot at Boeing, that the box is designed to be crash-proof and is installed in the most crash-survivable part of the aircraft, usually the tail section. And if it gets damaged from an impact like this one, it's a question about the quality of the black box. So, India's aviation experts worry that India is flying more faster and farther than ever before, but its ability to investigate severe crashes remains stuck in neutral. And while officials promise a preliminary report of the investigation within 30 days, experts say deeper reforms can't wait. Wow, India's air safety program is not only a mess, but extremely underfunded. Pretty scary, actually. Well, it was an interesting look at some inside baseball into India's aviation safety situation that I thought you would find interesting. But as always, I look forward to hearing your thoughts, so please be sure and let me know down below.